Welcome to this presentation on the drift, how men lose clarity and direction without even realizing it. My name is Artemis, founder of Sovereign Training Systems. Let's dive in. There are three major obstacles that every man faces on the path to achieving sovereign power: sedation, the drift, and the tunnel. Today, we're going to do a deep dive into the drift. For leaders and high performers, these don't always look obvious at first glance. These obstacles often exist beneath great success and effort, and there is a way through. The drift begins when momentum slows and the direction is no longer clear. For leaders and high performers, the drift doesn't always look like failure. It looks like success without clarity or the fire of purpose driving them forward. The drift can show up after a man loses his anchor to his purpose, even after years of success. Why this matters. You may still be moving forward in your life, family, and business. You're still building, you're still leading, but your edge is fading, and your direction and certainty is fading with it. There are 5 stages of a man. Let's dive in. Let's unpack these stages. These are really important to understand because each man at each stage experiences the drift differently. The 5 stages of a man. A man can evolve through 5 stages. Not all men get to king or elder, and that's okay. The first stage, stage 1, is page. That's your younger years. When you graduate high school and you enter the world and you begin to build value in the marketplace, you enter the knight phase. With knight comes prince. Prince is in your 30s and 40s. Prince is when you start building and you define your purpose and you start leading and building from purpose. King is when prince evolves. There's a very special process I'll teach you called the tunnel. An elder is the wise one. Elders are very rare. And we'll get into that in just a second. Each stage brings more power. Each stage brings more responsibility and more pain of growth. We will explore how the drift shows up in each of these stages right now. Drift is a slow loss of direction and clarity, not collapse, not failure, just a quiet separation from clarity, conviction, and purpose. Drift happens when leaders and high performers keep moving without recalibrating. You build, you expand your business and your team. You start to carry more power and responsibility, but you don't realign or recalibrate, and you start to fragment that power. Your external world keeps growing, but your internal identity and orientation doesn't reorganize with it. So pressure increases and clarity decreases, and then you enter the drift. For high-performing men and leaders, it shows up subtly. Decisions take longer. Focus becomes scattered. You start second-guessing what used to feel clear. You're active, but not aligned. You're producing, but not progressing. And a question starts to surface. Why do my choices feel off, even though nothing is broken? And underneath all of this, there's the pressure of your life, from your business, people depending on you, decisions that don't stop, expectations that keep rising, from your family, needing your presence, your leadership, your stability, even when you're silently depleted and you're afraid to share your vulnerability with others. From the world, constant noise, comparison, urgency, and the demand to keep performing so you carry the pressure. From your business, your family, and your world, you're just trying to hold it together. You're trying to stay strong. And over time, that weight pulls you away from yourself, your true self, your core identity. Staying in the drift for too long begins leaking power. Time leaks. Your power begins fragmenting, and your standards quietly begin dropping in your family and your business. You start lowering your standards in nutrition, in fitness, in performance, in quality of self-care. You begin to settle or sedate pain. Here is the danger. The drift doesn't feel dangerous at first. That's exactly why it is. Most men don't know they're drifting until something in their life begins to break, breaking in your marriage, breaking in your health, breaking in your business. Let's talk about the knight in the drift. The knight wants to prove himself, become successful, and make his mark in the world. The knight loves to get paid and get laid, and he loves winning. The drift here looks like excess, more stimulation, more pleasure, more chaos, more reaction. Activity replaces clarity and direction. When the knight begins to seek pleasure over purpose, he enters the drift easily. Energy is burned without structure. His discipline weakens. He continues to chase pleasure and money instead of building his purpose and his kingdom. Let's talk about the prince in the drift. Now, this is going to be in the 30s and 40s for a man. The prince aligns with his purpose and defines his clear vision. He starts to build something meaningful, a career, a business, a mission. The prince phase lasts between 12 and 20 years, depending on the soul and the creative process. And the prince phase has three distinct phases: early prince, middle prince, and late prince. Here, the drift becomes more subtle. He is busy, but he feels disconnected. He is successful, but he starts to feel unclear. He builds, but he loses his connection to why. His clarity begins to fade, and the hidden pain of growth, the call to rise, it starts to surface. Slowly, the prince's conviction weakens, and slowly he begins to compromise. Not all at once, but in ways that are easy to justify. And the prince, after building 10 to 15 years, begins to rest on his laurels. He delays the hard decisions. He tolerates what once would have been corrected. He says yes when he knows he should have said no. He stays busy to avoid what needs to change. He chooses comfort over truth. The prince will maintain what is working. And instead of stepping through the tunnel and letting go of his identity, he may continue to drift for a while longer. This is because he lacks the spiritual clarity of what is actually occurring in his life. And that is the tunnel. This is the descent into darkness, the movement from prince to king. And this is a sacred time. The tunnel begins during the late prince phase. In the later stage of being the prince, something breaks. The identity that built his success, the mask, the hero, the protector, the guardian that built his amazing life, business, and career, this mask can no longer carry him. This sovereign path that I created is especially useful for this particular phase of a man's life, to traverse the tunnel consciously. The tunnel is the descent into darkness. It is the dissolution of the ego. The version of him that built his life starts to lose power. The strategies that once worked stop working. The habits that carried him, they no longer hold. And he can still perform, but it takes more effort and it gives him less return. At the same time, nothing new is stabilized. There's no clear next identity, no solid ground to stand on, no reliable way to forward. And this is one of the scariest things for a man as he's moving through the tunnel, is he loses his sense of self. So the prince exists in between the identity that built his life and the new identity that God is asking of him now. And in that space, clarity disappears, certainty fades, and control starts to slip. This is the tunnel. It's not failure. It's not a breakdown. It's an awakening all at once. The tunnel is necessary for every man before they become a king and before the king can truly emerge. It is a sacred rite of passage. And sometimes the drift in this stage can last for years until you have guidance, clarity, and direction. At this stage, the drift becomes deeply internal, where you are overthinking, withdrawal from what used to excite you. You start to sedate with drugs, alcohol, vacations, or worse, you double down on your work and suppress the pain with staying busy, and things just get harder and more frustrating. You're searching for something you can't identify without a map or a compass. The cost of the drift in the tunnel is that many men stay here too long because they don't have the language for this experience. This is why you're here. And this is why you're watching this right now, if you are in the tunnel, because you haven't had a map and you haven't had a compass. Without a course correction, sedation eventually becomes the friend of the man in the drift. The king in the drift. Yes, kings get into a drift too. The king emerges from the tunnel. He builds something real, purposeful, and mission-driven. Kings have a clear identity in the world, and they're leading a great kingdom. If you are a king watching this right now, it is very clear what you stand for and what you do not stand for. Here, the drift looks like control, a life of over-responsibility, yet isolating yourself with the fear of being vulnerable to get to your next level. It's really hard for kings to ask for help sometimes, and then leadership gradually becomes heavy. Power becomes strained here when the king is in the tunnel. Decisions lose their precision. The king will lead, but not from full alignment. Even kings can experience the drift when they lack the right orientation and architecture that moves them towards elder. The fifth and final stage is elder. Elders are very rare. The elder has integrated it all. They are the magician. They no longer chase power or recognition. You'll often see an elder sitting quietly in the back of the room, not saying anything, not boasting, not even talking about his results or his success. And if you meet an elder and you know he's one, the best thing you can do is ask him for guidance because they wait to be asked. The elder stabilizes power. Whereas the king takes command of the field to build his kingdom, an elder takes full command of the field that builds legacies, quietly and silently. The elder becomes the legend on the map of creation. Kings and elders are rare. They are the top 1% of 1% of our society. Every man wants to become a king, but in reality, few men are willing to pay the price. That price is pressure, pain, and complete submission to his calling through God. Now let's talk about guiding yourself out of the drift. Drift is not a discipline issue. It's not just a structural issue. For leaders and high performers, it is a misalignment between your neurology, biology, and psychology, alignment, coherence, and capacity. You are still pushing to succeed through an old identity, but your current identity cannot expand into correct actions. So your system begins to split. One signal comes from your mask, the hero, the protector, the people pleaser, working from pressure, performance, control, and significance. The other signal comes from something deeper, a calling for truth, alignment, and expansion. And when these signals conflict, you drift. You don't have a lack of drive. You are just fragmenting your power because you lack alignment. When the mask is unveiled and you come into alignment and coherence, you get a clear signal. There's no more internal conflict, no more fragmentation of power. You stop forcing and you start commanding the field from clarity, alignment, and real power. This is the sovereign cross. This is the map of heaven to earth. First, a man, whether sedating, in the drift, or in the tunnel, must achieve alignment, coherence, and capacity. When you achieve capacity through alignment and coherence, you have the true containment of power. Through alignment and coherence, you can shift orientation from the mask to your core identity, which is your soul, your genius, your superpower, your vision, your values, your mission. And with orientation comes a new structure and architecture to form a new identity. And through defined architecture of how you live your life, mask unveiled, you reinforce alignment and coherence, because it's very easy to fall out of alignment without the proper identity and architecture. This is the sovereign cross, and this is the path to achieving the containment of true power. When alignment is restored, your clarity returns, your biology and coherence stabilize. You have your compass again, and your direction in life, family, and business, it begins to sharpen. You stop forcing things. You start leading from a new orientation, identity, and architecture once you've achieved alignment and coherence. If you've made it this far in the presentation, you already know something may be off in your life. Not on the surface, but underneath your performance. The question is no longer if you're leaking power. It may be, where are you leaking power? The sovereign power profile was built to show you exactly that. This is not a personality test, and it's not another tool. It's a diagnostic that reveals which mask is running your system, where your power is fragmenting, what stage of the path you're actually on right now. So I invite you to take the sovereign power profile now. It's 3 to 5 minutes, and it will give you immediate clarity. Remember, you're not stuck and you're not broken. You're carrying more than you've processed, and that is what's pulling you off course. So tap the link below this video to get started. Take the sovereign power profile today. I look forward to seeing you on the other side.